Good evening. I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Board of Education. Today is Monday, September 30th, 2013, and we are meeting at the Fordyce Building. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Lysy.
Here.
Mr. Smith. Here. Mrs. Sudar.
Here.
Mrs. Van Hoen.
Here.
Mrs. DeAngelis.
Here.
Motion carries. All members are present. Excuse me. Close enough.
Give them a week off.
Is there anyone who'd like to speak to any items on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on then to the 2013-14 appropriations, and we'll turn that over to Mr. Vasic, our treasurer.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the board, Mr. Bell. First of all, I want to thank you for coming to this special meeting tonight. We obviously had this scheduled for last week, and circumstances prevented me from being here, so I appreciate you arranging your schedules to be here to talk about the appropriations for the 13-14 year. As we all know, appropriations are the legally authorized spending limit that the board gives to the administration. We keep our books by fund. The general operating fund is pretty much the unrestricted funds that the board uses to operate the district. And we have several other funds, including debt service fund, permanent improvement fund, our health reserve, student activities, federal state grants. Those are restricted monies that have to be accounted for and appropriated separately. But we're going to focus on the general operating fund tonight. The measure being proposed totals in the general fund $71.2 million. This compares to last year's appropriation of $70.8 million, and that represents a 0.58% increase over last year's appropriation. This comes on the heels of two previous years of pretty significant decreases, totaling over 7% over the previous 2 years, fiscal 12 and fiscal 13. Typically, this board or this district has spent in the neighborhood of, on average, 97 to 98% of the appropriations. Actual expenditures have come in below appropriations at a tune of about 97 or 98%. This number, 71.2 million, based on an assumption of a actual spend of 98%, puts us right in line with what we have in our 5-year forecast for spending for this fiscal year. Adding in all the other funds, that is another $23.7 million. Again, those are all the other restricted funds in this measure. Some key items on revenue. We have real estate estimated at $34.6 million this year. This is up from an actual total of $32.8 million. This represents the first full year collection in the fiscal year from the 2012 operating levy. And again, it also includes the loss due to the reappraisal in 2012 of $2 million. So there's overall, it is an increase, but it's mitigated quite a bit by that loss. Income tax, we have estimated at $6.3 million. This represents a 2.5% increase over fiscal 13. Fiscal 13 exceeded fiscal 12 by about 4%, so felt that things would continue in a positive fashion. As we know, the state has developed and passed a new state funding model with the biennium budget. It includes factors it recognizes factors of wealth issues or lack of wealth, both income and property value wise. There's also additional funding for special ed. So we're looking at approximately $21.6 million in this fiscal year compared to $20.2 million last fiscal year. It would be more, except the state imposed a cap in both the 14 and 15 fiscal years. The cap this year is 6.25%, so that $21.6 million essentially reflects a 6.25% increase. Next year, that cap is being raised to, I believe, 10.5%. School choice between charter schools, the voucher program, and open enrollment, it's estimated that $10.3 million will be deducted. So the 21.6 is net of the school choice estimate. The figure last year for school choice was $8.8 million, so that continues to rise. The tangible hold harmless, as the board will remember, as the tangible property tax was phased out, there were some direct reimbursements to school districts, and it was to be phased in as the personal tangible was phased out, and then the hold harmless direct reimbursement was to be phased down. This biennium budget maintained last year's level. We received $1.1 million, so we expect the $1.1 million to remain in effect for both this fiscal year and last fiscal year. By the way, the high point of the hold harmless was the fiscal 10-11 year for us. That was $4.3 million. This fiscal year will also reflect the first full year collection of the casino revenue. We received one payment. They come in 2 payments a year, and we're estimating about $270,000 would be received this year. It comes to us via the state, so in the documents, it's reflected under other state revenues. Some budgetary notes. Staffing. Our certified staff is remaining largely unchanged. There's a slight decrease of about 1.3 FTEs. The real change is in support staff due to the privatization of transportation. The support staff is dropping by about 45 FTEs this year. As far as collective bargaining agreements, we are still in the midst of bargaining. We don't have final figures, but we believe that we will. We believe that the 2% increase factor in the forecast will be maintained throughout. So that's what I have built in to the appropriation measure. Because of our fairly low increase and the transportation privatization, our personnel costs are actually being reduced this year from $54.9 million to $53.1 million. Non-personnel costs are going up due to the fact that the transportation cost will now be a purchase service. Okay, so that's being increased from 18.1 to 15.9 million. These are just totals. Fiscal 12-13, we had receipts of $67.7 million. The appropriation was $70.8. The actual expenditure was $68.8 million, I believe. We're forecasting revenues of $70.1 million, and again, our appropriation measure is $71.2 million. From an object standpoint, you'll see that both wages and benefits are decreasing. Benefits not quite as much as wages, because we are expecting a fairly hefty increase in medical costs this year between what the market's doing with the the Health Care Act and claims which have gone up this last year, I'm expecting a double-digit increase in January for medical insurance. So that reduction isn't quite as significant as the wages. Again, purchase services, we're investing over $2 million in our transportation agreement, so there's quite a hefty increase in purchase services. The other major increase is in capital. I wrote in a document that Mr. Bartkowski needs to make a significant investment in our server setup. We currently have, I believe the total he gave me was 22 servers up in their server room upstairs. We're getting to the point with I guess just the evolution of technology, being more dependent on it, we are kind of reconfiguring our server makeup. We're going to be going from 22 servers, it might be 21, I'm not positive, but actually down to 3 servers. And it's something called virtual servers, which I don't fully understand, but it does take a significant investment. This is kind of a once in a several year, maybe a 10-year investment that we need to take on. So our system and network will be more reliable, the data will be safer, and the performance will increase with that. And that's about a $200,000 investment.
And I can help a little bit, members of the board. The virtual server will also allow us to increase our capacity. One of the things that we have to be concerned about is the fact that when we look at next generation assessments, being able to have those devices able to have the capacity to do what they need to do, and having enough space, it's not necessarily bandwidth, but it's space to be able to do that. The virtual servers allow us to do that, where we don't have to be dependent on the number of servers, and being virtual meaning that the capacity is increased due to the fact that it's not necessarily a physical unit. It's not a tangible physical unit. It's a virtual type situation. So when it was explained to me, I get that part of it, but it's really an opportunity for us to be able to ensure that when our kids are using these devices and doing what they need to do in order for them to take these next generation assessments, that we have enough space to be able to accommodate that. So it's going to help us to be able to do that and be more efficient.
So in effect, just going up to the cloud, in order the information goes up to a cloud and we pull it back down.
Mm-hmm. At a virtual point, yes.
This is a pie chart of the object level. Now the personnel is, the wages are 53%, benefits are 21%. We're starting to go through a shift here with the privatization. The personnel percentage of last year was 56%, and the benefits was 22%. And the purchase services was actually 16%. So you see that's starting to change with what we're doing. We've always been able to maintain that 80% threshold or a little bit below. With this, obviously, we're at 74% of personnel. It's far below historical averages.
Yeah.
From a function standpoint, there really aren't a whole lot of major changes as far as the makeup. Transportation is still transportation, regardless of the object. This is looking at it from a functional standpoint or the purpose of the funds. The one point I would make is in pupil transportation, you see a reduction of $300,000. The privatization will save us about $500,000 a year into the future. This year we had some runoff costs in July and August. We had some summer runs. We had medical insurance, for the people through August. So there was about $167,000 worth of personnel costs and transportation in this fiscal year. So that's why we don't see the $500,000 savings there. The other non-operational is up. This reflects that transfer we had to make, I believe it was last month, to put those dollars into the maintenance fund that we received from the state. That was an extra transfer we typically don't make. I would say one thing about the function standpoint is, beginning with this fiscal year, districts will have their not only per pupil spending on the report card, but how we spend. They're going to show a classroom versus non-classroom, and we're starting to get some information about what's considered classroom. Obviously, instruction is, pupil support is, student activities will be considered quote-unquote classroom. So we actually have done some changing with personnel. A lot of our aides were coded to staff support. In the past, it didn't make a whole lot of difference, but we can very well make the case they're there for pupils. And pupil support does go into the classroom category. So we're trying to stay ahead of it and manage the process as we go.
So coaches, the academic coaches would also go in there
Yes.
as well, and so forth.
All the student activity costs will go under the classroom area.
But transportation does not.
That's correct. That's correct. And this is just a pie chart of those numbers. And that is all I have to present, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Does the board have any questions? Smith?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Steve, your third slide on the revenue side, this was a question that I asked Mr. Bell, so Mr. Bell, if you want to chime in on this. What my question is regarding the state income source with the new formula. I'll give you a moment to get there. I think it's important for the benefit of the public to know that this 6.25% cap, essentially, the current administration has come up with a new set of criteria for determining how much money each one of the 613 public school districts should receive. But they put a cap on it to make sure you don't receive too much new money. And it's my understanding that if that cap wasn't there, we would be receiving millions more from the state of Ohio. And I guess I just want the public to be aware that according to the formula that the state of Ohio has come up with to adequately fund education, we are due more money due to a variety of factors, including our increasing enrollment and other things, yet we're not allowed to have that. And what's interesting, what's not interesting, what's marginally disturbing is, but the educational needs that correspond still are there. Mm-hmm. It's not like our educational costs have been capped at 6.25%. So this is just another way that the Euclid Public School System is being asked to meet increased state mandates without the resources that even the state of Ohio thinks we should have.
The state has a habit of bringing forth new formulas and new funding structures, and then they put a lot of work in it, and it'll make some sense a lot of times, and then at the end, okay, here's a brand new formula, but we're funding it at 90% or whatever, or there's a cap on it. So I'm encouraged by the formula itself. I hope the formula stays intact for us. It would be good if they raise the cap. So.
And again, I sort of know how much money we would be due, but do you have that figure out?
It would be approximately another $6 million.
Right, yeah, that was the information that was provided to me. I just wanted to hear whether or not that was the same thing. And again, I mean, if you think about, how, again, what that would do to our budget, what that could do to the student services that we would offer, what that would do to future possible levies, because that's $6 million additional a year.
That would extend the next levy for years.
Yeah, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
And again, that we've been capped, that we essentially are deserving of this money based on the formula that the bureaucrats came up with. But we're not going to get it. But again, we still have to meet the same educational outcomes that, other districts are. And again, I'm not trying to shake those educational outcomes. I'm not, but again, it's one of those things that the public just, needs to be aware of.
Steve, can I just say one thing? Mr. Smith, members of the board, you also mentioned that there was a projection of a 10% cap for next year. Is that?
Yes, that's in
the
place.
first time I've heard that. So is that?
Oh, yeah.
That's in place.
That's it. That's
It
already
is
in
budget
place.
in budget, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but they could still take that off, which means that.
They can make a change at any time.
But that would mean that we would be guaranteed at least at a minimum of 10% of the cap then for next year, the maximum amount that we would be capped would be 10%, as it was 6%
Yes.
this year, would be 10% next year. So it'd be an additional 4%.
It'd be additional 10%.
We're capped at 6%.
So this, in addition
That's
to
what I'm trying to get, that's what I'm trying
I
to
believe
get.
it'd be additional 10% up.
Really, if I'm doing my simple math, it's 16%.
Yes.
2 years.
That's what I was trying
The
to.
estimates that were produced, now these are gross estimates. This is prior to any of the deductions for
Right, get
for
that.
vouchers and everything.
Understand.
The number for this year is 1.8 million.
Okay.
That's on the 6.25. Next year, with the 10.5% cap, it was 3.3 million, an additional $3.3 million.
So yeah, I suppose the good news is that the cap is going to increase according to, and again, State of Ohio operates on a 2-year budget. The first year of the budget, we're capped at 6.25, and for the second year, we're capped at 10.5. Again, we would probably blow that cap out of the water, but we will get some additional revenue. That is, if Columbus doesn't, over the course of the next 12 months, reduce the cap, reduce the amount of revenue that, there's obviously the projection is encouraging, but the history of state government
Not so much.
is reason for us to not spend that additional revenue just yet. That was my only comment that I wanted to make sure got out there in public discourse.
the other, as long as we're on this slide, the other point that's on there is the casino revenue that everybody's been waiting to hear how much we would get. And when you consider we're talking about a $70 million budget, and the casino revenue gives us $270,000, that's a pretty small amount. We appreciate any little bit we can get, but please understand, it's not a big windfall, just like everyone thought the lottery was going to be a big windfall. And I know people are going to be asking us, well, what did you do with that casino revenue? And we're really not talking about a lot of money to help.
What I do like about the casino, at least at this point, is it's being kept separate. If you, us old timers know that in the beginning, the lottery money was separated out,
Right.
and then it was just thrown in the pot with everything else, and they would throw it up here and take some out here. At least for now, that's a separate revenue stream. So,
Like you say, we'll wait and see how long that happens,
Right.
though. Are there other questions or comments for Mr. Vassick? Let me just go through mine real quick. I noticed in the important thing for us to understand the reason that we're even getting the 6.25% that we're capped at, is reflected in the fact that our property values have gone down since 2007. But our biggest hit was more recently, and unfortunately, we're only getting, they were doing an average of 3 years, as I understand, for your property values, and we only got
Yes,
really 1
and-
year after the reappraisal.
Yes, and it's an average of 3 years, and that will not change for the biennium. Well, it doesn't matter because the cap's there anyway.
Right,
but,
right, we wouldn't get any more anyhow.
We won't get the full effect in the formula until the cap is lifted and a couple years from now.
Okay. And I always like to remind people when they look at the income tax amount that that was put in effect to help the senior citizens in the community who wanted to support the schools but felt they couldn't. That replaced a levy that was on the ballot at the time. So it's not additional money. It grows slightly, as we can see, a little bit of growth, but it really, people need to keep in mind that it's really replacing another levy amount that just would have been on the other part of the taxes instead. The other question I had is, do we know, let me rephrase it. In the past, we've always subsidized the charter schools by the effect of the fact that we lose more money from the state than what we actually get per pupil. So when their idea of adding the number of students in and then taking them back out, taking the money back out, they take more than what we would have gotten from them. Are we still in that situation?
Yes, we are. I mean, just simple math, you could take the 21.6 million and divide it by, I don't even know what our enrollment is off the top of my head right now, but divide by,
5415.
okay, so that's in the 4,000s. They're,
Well, and even that, you still have to add theirs in too, right? Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying just
Yeah.
ours, because they're
Yeah,
actually
I'm just
including
doing it,
theirs, yeah.
quick
So
check
it's
with the math. So
it's even less than that.
5,700, yeah.
Yeah, so that's an important thing that I know the legislators, or a lot of them, don't understand, because I know down in the Cincinnati area, several of them have been saying the charter schools don't cost public schools any money, and in fact they do. And so what we have is local taxpayers dollars that are passed for the Euclid schools on the ballot. Actually, it doesn't all
And
come
it's
in our bill.
not a dollar for dollar factor. Several years ago, we actually took a look at the charter kids. We made the assumption, okay, what if they came back here? You know, what grade level are they? Where they live? Where they go to school? Special needs, or many. If we brought them all back and put them where they needed to go, how much would it cost us in terms of staffing and supplies and all that? And what we felt we kind of knew without looking at it is, you know, if a kid comes back with his $5,700, we're going to put him in a class, and we're not going to hire another teacher. Same thing happens when they leave. You know, they take their $5,700. We can't reduce staff. But we actually did the exercise and figured that those students, if they all came back, would cost about half of what they took with them. Okay? So...
That's significant, that's significant dollars.
Yeah, to that point, dividing 21.6 million by 5415 gets us an average student calculation amount of $3,988.
So we're talking almost $2,000.
Yeah.
Out of local.
Yeah, 1,800.
Yeah. And people need to realize that that money is taken out before it even gets to us. So we have to keep scrambling to get the money that it takes to teach our students, because the state has ways of manipulating the funds. And I'm glad you did point out that these are the numbers we know for next year as of today, because you and I have been around long enough to know that the state can at any time decide to, oh no, on second thought, we're cutting this or cutting that, and everything can change. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, at this point, then, we'll take a motion to accept the appropriations.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Lysy, second
Second.
by Mr. Smith. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Sudar?
Yes.
Mrs. Van Hoen?
Yes.
Mrs. De Angelis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lysy?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for providing us with so much information in our book and everything, so that this was
Very good.
easy to go through the information and know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
At this time, the board will be going into executive session for a student expulsion hearing, continuation and negotiations. The only action the board will take after that time will be in regards to the student expulsion, and no further action will be taken. And I have a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make the motion that we go into executive session for the purpose of student expulsion and negotiations.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mrs. Lysy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sudar?
Yes.
Mrs. Van Hoen?
Yes.
Mrs. De Angelis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lysy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.